The Department of Justice screwed something up a month ago about the handling of top secret classified sealed documents about Mar-a-Lago and Jack Smith's report, and they just got around to telling Judge Cannon about it today. Oh yeah, when you have to tell the judge that you accidentally sent out the entire Mar-a-Lago report to a third party and have had to now try to claw it back, you probably want to tell the judge about that maybe when it happened a month ago and not now. But no, there's a new filing, a joint notice of inadvertent discovery disclosure that the government had to file where they had to admit, mea culpa style, we screwed up on a report you've tried to bury, Judge Cannon. I'm Michael Popak. You're on Legal AF on Thursday. Let's get to the reporting. You may remember that Judge Cannon, with absolutely no adverse parties on either side, just Donald Trump and Donald Trump, decided to bury the Mar-a-Lago Jack Smith Volume 2 report. We saw Volume 1. Volume 1 came out because Merrick Garland, the then Department of Justice Attorney General, let it out. But he didn't get around to letting out the Mar-a-Lago report, leaving that to Pam Bondi to bury. She, along with Donald Trump, filed a motion with Judge Cannon, their favorite judge in Fort Pierce, who may or may not be trying out to be a United States Supreme Court justice, and she agreed with the Department of Justice. She rapped the knuckles of Jack Smith and said, how dare you? And you shouldn't have been revealing. And why did you file this? And she sealed in a tomb forever, subject to appellate review, the Mar-a-Lago report. She said it's never going to be revealed, not by this Department of Justice controlled by Donald Trump and not by a future one controlled by somebody else. Now, parties like American Oversight and public interest groups don't like that, so they took an appeal to the 11th Circuit. The 11th Circuit was about to hold oral argument about it and whether they're going to reverse Judge Cannon. They've reversed her before about Mar-a-Lago, but they have subsequently postponed the hearing. Fast forward to the new filing. As you may have heard, there used to be a managing assistant U.S. attorney. Her name is Carmen Mercedes Lineberger, and she worked in the Fort Pierce office of the Department of Justice. Well, I guess, as alleged, she didn't like the fact that Cannon was going to seal forever the Volume 2 Mar-a-Lago report, and maybe she wanted to preserve it for posterity. But according to an indictment against her, yeah, she was indicted, she sent home to her home email, her personal email, a copy of Volume 2 that she just happened to have in the office under the title chocolate cake recipe or bunt cake recipe. Yes, it's the famous bunt cake indictment. See, this Department of Justice has bunt cake indictments and seashell formation indictments against James Comey, the FBI director, and all sorts of crazy things. So she's indicted. She could be looking at 20 years in prison for falsifying what she did, trying to cover her tracks, as the indictment alleges, and for sending home this document that doesn't belong to her. If you're 64 or older, you need to understand this. Medicare is so complicated that many people plan. And if you're current, overwhelmed, DOJ, because they're so sloppy, was an actual document of the Volume 2 of the report. Okay? Now, the Department of Justice has released Volume 2 before, except when they don't want to. Like when Jack Smith testified, they didn't let him answer any questions about Volume 2. Here, they embedded in an email Volume 2 and sent it to the lawyers for Carmen Mercedes Lineberger, the former managing assistant U.S. attorney, which then the defense lawyers, being good officers of the court, reported it back to the Department of Justice. And here goes the inadvertent discovery disclosure that they've now had to tell Judge Cannon. Judge Cannon, here's what they say. On May 19th, 2026, the grand jury returned an indictment against Ms. Lineberger. Access to the report, the Mar-a-Lago report, as part of criminal discovery in the separate matter remains a contested issue. So there's another judge, not Cannon, who's presiding over the indictment. In fact, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida, where Lineberger used to work, is not handling the prosecution. It's been given over to the Northern District of Florida to kind of not have a conflict of interest, because she used to work in the office for like a dozen years, and a special prosecutor out of Tallahassee. Okay, June 3rd, which is a month ago, the government fulfilled its obligations under Rule 16 of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure. We call it Brady material. You got to turn over to the criminal defendant all inculpatory and exculpatory material. The material that tends to prove your guilt or your innocence. They turn it over in flash drives, portable storage units for computers. On June 9th, Defense counsel promptly notified the government that upon reviewing the electronic discovery, they identified 3 documents embedded within materials that maybe the government didn't intend to produce. Upon review, the government confirmed the documents in question were copies of Volume 2 of the report that were embedded within the emails that were produced. And then they had the defense counsel voluntarily stop review of the discovery material, affirm that they had not examined the document, and deleted all discovery materials downloaded and returned the flash drives to the government. This all went down on the 3rd of June and the 9th of June. Why is this being filed so late? The government acknowledges the professionalism and candor of the defense counsel in remedying the inadvertent inclusion. Government never figured it out. The government, this corrupt Department of Justice, sent out a sealed document that they had fought hard through Donald Trump to bury forever. They sent it out to a third party through an email, through a flash drive, and then waited a month to tell the judge about it. Now, Judge Cannon's in the news again because if there's 2 openings on the United States Supreme Court, she's a shortlist candidate for it. I'm just telling you, I don't blow smoke or sunshine here. And she knows it. She knows it. Every defamation case that Donald Trump has against the BBC or the Washington Post or somebody that's his political rival or enemy, he files, but he files it away from Judge Cannon down in another part of Florida in Miami. He's got a couple of things pending in front of her. He's got the grand conspiracy against John Brennan and James Comey and others that's being run out of apparently Fort Pierce to put it next to her. But most of the cases, especially the ones where he doesn't have any good faith belief that they're legit, he puts somewhere else. So Cannon, her decision from several months ago in which she not only sealed forevermore this Volume 2 that Ms. Lineberger is accused of sending home to herself as a cake recipe, that issue, and binding the future Department of Justice, that issue of whether she can do it is not going to be brought by the parties to the case. That was Trump's co-defendants, all the lawyers that are now in Donald Trump's Department of Justice as criminal defense lawyers. They're not going to raise the issue. So a third party, American Oversight, who I've recently interviewed, they're bringing the case, and it's up on appeal with the 11th Circuit. Now, I was a little troubled that appellate hearing that was supposed to happen got pushed and postponed. Sometimes it's scheduling. Sometimes it may indicate something else, but it is still up on appeal, and we'll have to get a determination on that. And all of this is going on while there's accusations against Judge Cannon that she is bending over backwards, as we know, to help the Trump administration. In fact, John O'Brennan, former CIA director for years under Obama and other presidents, chief spy master of the United States, he's not waiting around to get indicted. There's a video up right behind this one on Legal AF YouTube channel that I just did about a lawsuit he just filed in D.C. in which he alleges the unholy close relationship between Donald Trump and Aileen Cannon, that he should not be investigated by her or her grand jury. He should not be indicted under her. Nothing. They're laying the groundwork for future vindictive prosecution, but they're also commenting on that close relationship between Cannon, Blanche, formerly Pam Bondi, and Donald Trump. And I think it's right to do. They even say that they filed a letter with the chief judge of the Southern District of Florida, Miami, Chief Altanaga, to call out the lack of independence of Judge Cannon. And here we have this one. Now, you know what's going to happen. I think people come to watch me, to listen to me, because I give pretty good predictions based on my years of experience and my political instincts. Here's what's going to happen. She is not going to wrap the knuckles of the Department of Justice for letting her know late about this disclosure. She'll acknowledge it in some way. She has no problem berating and censuring and rapping the knuckles of Jack Smith, which she's done in order after order. Jack Smith, bad Jack Smith, you did bad things. You shouldn't have done it. You call yourself a special prosecutor and you're not, and all this other crap. But the government, the Department of Justice, the most corrupt in our lifetime, taking their sweet time to advise her about a disclosure that they made, that's going to be met with oh ho hum. Huh, thank you for telling me. Guaranteed. And if that's it, the fix is in. I feel like I'm doing like The Godfather. You know, whoever comes to you, Michael, and tries to make a deal with Barzini, that's the traitor in the family. If she does an oh ho hum, I don't care order, thank you for telling me, you know the fix is in with her and the Department of Justice, because she's not going to do anything to ruffle feathers as we're looking at two potential Supreme Court justices, Alito and Thomas, retiring in the next several months, and are being a big fat opening on the United States Supreme Court. I'm going to continue to follow it all. We've got some great programming this weekend, all the way through till the end of until the end of the 4th of July weekend. Sorry. We're trying to build this channel. Hit the free subscribe button. Help us continue to grow it. We're trying to get to 1.2 million over the weekend. We'll do it with your help. It's all for free. Come over to Legal AF Substack, where I'm posting this filing for your viewing pleasure. Till my next report, this is Michael Popok here. When life changes in an instant because of an injury or the bad acts of another, you need fighters in your corner. The Popok firm is dedicated to helping the injured and their families get justice and the money they deserve, and we don't back down. Contact us today and let's start your fight for justice together. Welcome to a special edition of Legal AF. Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, now the nominee to be the Attorney General, is making a goodwill tour of the Senate to try to get those votes together for his confirmation hearing. Seems to be only focused on the Republican votes, but he's got a body of work, a curriculum vitae, a corrupted one at that needs to be explored by the Senate. Any one of the things that I'll talk to you about with our next special guest would be a disqualifier in any other era for any other nominee to be Attorney General. And there's not one of them. There's a dozen of them. And we're going to talk, including new information and new reporting coming out just in the last 48 hours to 72 hours with the New York Times bombshell expose about a cover-up at the highest levels operated out of the Situation Room with likely recordings or transcripts of those meetings that Todd Blanche was involved with. I mean, one participant called it Donald Trump's Iran-Contra. Okay, well, if it's Donald Trump's Iran-Contra, what does that make Todd Blanche? Let's talk about it all with the senator from Rhode Island, Sheldon Whitehouse. Senator Whitehouse, how are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me on, Michael.
Absolutely. Great to see you at Netroots Nation, too, a couple of weeks ago in Philadelphia. Great panel on SCOTUS reform. We'll have you back to talk about that. We need to do that as well.
Plenty to talk about there.
Oh, yeah. So the gloves should be off with Todd Blanche. He has said in a press conference he's willing to talk to anybody. Let's start there. Has he made arrangements to talk to you?
No, not at this point. I think they're trying to make sure they've got. Their Republican votes lined up, which I doubt they actually have at this point, given his record. So I think there's both a sort of friendliness tour by Blanche and a pressure campaign by the White House to try to get Republicans lined up. This is not going to be an easy vote for Republicans. This is going to be a stinker. of a vote for Republicans.
Yeah, you referred to it recently on a mainstream media. You referred to it as a stinking pile of baggage. I wasn't sure where you were going with that, but I like the turn of the phrase. So in terms of just things that have happened while Todd Blanche has been the Attorney General or Deputy Attorney General, you've got the Epstein cover-up now fully exposed by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan in the New York Times, with detailed reporting with 1,000 corroborating witnesses and sources, including inside the government, what appears to be a recording or a transcript of what went down about the cover-up led by Todd Blanche. You've got his leadership, if that's the right word, about the anti-weaponization slush fund to reward Jan 6th insurrectionists who attacked the Capitol and law enforcement, and his next day attempt to unilaterally amend that to give a super pardon to Trump and his family for everything that's lawfare or weaponization and his tax and audit liability. Then you've got the fraud on the court that is being explored by a federal judge, Judge Williams, in my backyard in Miami, which has now come to a head, and a vindictive prosecution finding by a judge in Tennessee, all under the leadership of Todd Blanche. Southern Poverty Law Center being prosecuted, the Seashell indictment. Need I go on? And he has a stick.
And that's the tip of the iceberg. There's a ton more just in terms of general incompetence and dishonesty by the Department of Justice that is blowing up in courtrooms all across the country in ways that are absolutely unprecedented for the Department of Justice and have cost it something that has really been the hallmark of the Department of Justice when it represents the government forever, which is the presumption of regularity. These clowns have destroyed the presumption of regularity, and that is a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, when I do the reporting, and we do it regularly here with dozens of videos a day on Legal AF, I try to in part based on my own 35 years experience, this is not normal. That sometimes it sounds like I'm ordering at the drive-thru at McDonald's, but when I say that a grand jury has returned a no bill, that they refuse to indict over and over again, that federal judges are observing the worst abuses of prosecutorial misconduct they've ever seen, where the Department of Justice manual seems to have been completely shredded and not being used by anybody. This is not normal. This is a presumption of irregularity, right?
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that we see on a regular basis coming out of courts describing the Department of Justice's conduct, even the milder stuff, like the government's argument is pretextual. That's a hot word in a judicial opinion about a government lawyer's argument. It means you're faking it. You're misleading the court. And that is a big deal. And something as simple as that, when I was U.S. attorney, if one of our federal judges had said that about one of my prosecutors or lawyers, there would have been immediate consequences. Maybe a meeting with the court, certainly a meeting with the prosecutors, maybe connecting in with OPR, the Office of Professional Responsibility, to confirm whether something went right or wrong. There would have been consequences. Now that doesn't even get noticed because you're dealing with potential contempt findings. You're dealing with discipline against U.S. attorneys. You're dealing with a first time ever, I believe, in the history of the Department of Justice, credible finding that there may have been a fraud on the court perpetrated by the Department of Justice at the highest levels. I mean, that's unthinkable stuff, as you know.
Hello.
Yes. This is Derry Harper who's speaking.
Hi, Derry. Scott Donaldson here. My wife, Amy.
All right. And Mr. and Mrs. Donaldson, I am working from home today, and we have been, as an office, working more from home than we have at the Federal Reserve Bank building. Any follow-up conversations, of course.
Radical candidates are self-describing, they're self-identifying as Marxist. They want to fundamentally transform this country. And sadly, many of these Democrat candidates and their voters just don't have the same zeal and affection for America. They don't appreciate the freedom that we have in this country. They're not even going to celebrate on July 4th. There's a new Gallup NBC poll that came out. Did you see that? Only 29% of Democrat voters.
And Blanche's response to that is to go after the bar associations and the bar regulators to try to sue them to get them off the back of his unethical conduct and that of his Department of Justice. I mean, the fish rots from the head, and it's definitely Todd Blanche.
Look at the case that you mentioned in Florida, where a federal judge, responding to a challenge by 36 retired federal judges that a fraud on the court may have been committed by the United States government, went ahead, reopened the case, and offered the Trump lawyers on both sides, his private lawyers and his government lawyers, the chance to come in and explain themselves. And what's telling about the judge's order, it was like super bland, super mild, no heat, no invective, none of that. But it did mention two things. It did mention that the Department of Justice might have violated its own policies in the way it proceeded, put up that flag for the DOJ to respond to, and noted that there was at least public reporting that there was a defense memo prepared by the DOJ client, the IRS, and what should I know about that was the hint from mentioning that was in the press. And so both of those things clearly target the Department of Justice lawyers. Those are things that the Department of Justice would be answering, not Trump's private law firm. And yet the Department of Justice filed nothing in the case. They hid behind a fairly bare bones pleading by Trump's private lawyers and haven't said a word, despite the obvious expectation of the court that they would have something to say. So when you're in a situation where the Department of Justice has been credibly charged and an inquiry has been opened into whether they committed a fraud upon the court, and then they don't have the courage to show up and answer, they just try to hide behind the Trump personal lawyers, that whole thing just reeks to high heaven. And Blanche's signature is on the tax amnesty document that is a part of that, and his fingerprints are all over the sleazy slush fund deal. By the way, I'm not sure that it's for previous harm and damage to Trump's violent political attack squads. I think there's a case to be made that this was actually the payroll account for future attacks on the election process in November, that he was going to be able to feed money out to his violent election interference thugs through this account so that he had an operation across the country to disrupt polling places on election day in November.
Yeah. He's definitely refunding them and recapitalizing these paramilitary organizations, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and the rest with the funding. As I have reminded our audience, more than 600 people have made a claim. 600 Jan 6ers have made a claim. Some of them in the tens of millions of dollars, including the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, under the Federal Tort Claim Act. So these are real claims that Trump's trying to figure out a way how to shovel money towards them. In terms of Judge Williams, I'm a member of the Florida Bar. I'm a member of the Southern District of Florida. I've been before Judge Williams. There's going to be a lot of problems for the Department of Justice and for Trump himself in her case. I think she holds after Friday's final reply brief by the 35 federal judges. I think she holds an evidentiary hearing. As you said, she called out the Department of Justice. She used the D word and the F word. She said deceit on the court and fraud on the court. And you needed, in order to respond to that, you needed a verified, under penalty of perjury, testimonial affidavit by Donald Trump's lawyer to say he didn't do it, and from the Department of Justice, and from the IRS, and probably from Stanford.
The choice we've made. stakes are high, the fight is real, but in our hands we hold the wheel. We'll drive the change, we'll set the course. Our voice is strong, we'll show our force. No one's left behind, no one's ignored. Every vote will be restored. The future waits, the time is near. Together we'll conquer every fear. Every vote matters, every choice. It's time to raise our voice. In every hand, the future we hold. In every ballot, stories told. Every vote matters, don't let it fade. It's in our hands, the choice we've made. The ballots speak, the people rise. We'll hold the truth beneath the sky.